"Will you stay if I show my scars?" the Apache woman asked the cowboy who risked his soul to protect the cowboy rode slowly through the dusty trail that cut across the open plains. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the dry, cracked ground. His horse was strong, but tired, and its hooves kicked up little clouds of dust with every step. The cowboy's eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. He had been on the road for days, and the landscape around him was both beautiful and dangerous. Rolling hills, rocky outcrops, and tall grass hid secrets, wild animals, hidden rivers, and people who would do him harm if given the chance. He had been traveling alone for a long time, and in his solitude he had learned to depend only on himself. Life had not been easy for him, and the experiences he had faced had taught him that trust was a rare thing.
He had seen people turn against one another over the smallest matters. He had fought to survive, lost friends along the way, and sometimes even questioned whether his own choices were right.
And yet he continued to move forward, guided by a simple principle: do what is right even if it costs you everything. That day the trail seemed unusually quiet. The wind whispered through the dry grass, and the occasional bird called out as it flew overhead. The cowboy tightened his grip on the reins, his mind alert. He knew that this quietness was not always a good sign. Sometimes the world held its breath before danger appeared. As he rounded a bend in the trail, he saw something unusual in the distance. At first it was only a figure, small and hunched, moving awkwardly across the land. The cowboy squinted, shielding his eyes from the sun. It was a woman, clearly alone, and she looked tired and frightened. Her movements were cautious, almost as if she were hiding from someone. Or something. The cowboy felt a familiar tug in his chest. He had seen fear many times in his life, but there was something different about this woman. It was not just the fear in her eyes, it was the weight of the world she carried. Even from a distance he could see that she had been through hardship. Her clothes were simple and worn, and the dust of the plains clung to her hair and skin.
She was not just running from danger. She was running from a life that had already taken too much from her. For a long moment, the cowboy considered his options. He could ride past and stay safe. He had done that before. He had turned away from strangers when the risk seemed too great, but something inside him would not let him leave this woman alone. Maybe it was the memory of his own past, the moments when someone had helped him, when he was desperate. Maybe it was a deeper sense of justice that refused to let innocence suffer when he had the power to prevent it. Whatever it was, he knew that he could not just ride away. He guided his horse closer, keeping a careful distance. The woman had not noticed him yet, and the cowboy wanted to assess the situation before making his presence known. As he approached, he could see that her eyes darted around constantly, her body tense and ready to run. She was small, but her spirit seemed strong even under the weight of fear. He realized that she was trying to survive, and every instinct in him told him that this was not a person who would give up easily. "Hey!" he called softly, careful not to startle her. His voice was calm, measured, carrying a tone of safety rather than command. The woman froze and then turned, her eyes wide as she looked at him. There was caution in her gaze, a question in her expression that asked whether he was friend or foe. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his hands visible. "I'm just passing through, same as you." For a long moment, she said nothing. She studied him carefully, as if weighing whether his words could be trusted. Finally, she nodded slightly, though her body remained tense. The cowboy sensed that trust would not come easily. This woman had learned long ago that words could lie, that promises could be broken, and that kindness was often followed by betrayal. The cowboy dismounted from his horse slowly, showing that he had no intention of causing harm. He moved closer, speaking gently. "I can help you. If you need a place to rest or someone to ride with, I can do that." "You don't have to be alone." Her eyes flicked toward his horse, then back to him. For a moment she hesitated. Then she shook her head slightly. Her lips pressed together. It was clear that she had survived by relying on herself, and letting someone else in was not easy. The cowboy respected that.
He knew that trust had to be earned, not demanded.
"I understand,"
he said quietly.
"I'll just ride alongside you for a while, then." You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. Just know that if you need help, I'm here.
Something shifted in her posture.
It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there.
She did not run. She did not turn away. She simply walked alongside him, keeping a cautious distance, but allowing him to be near. The cowboy felt a small sense of relief. This was a beginning. It was not trust yet, but it was the first sign that she might let someone else share a small part of her burden. The sun began to dip lower in the sky and the shadows grew longer. They continued along the trail in silence. The cowboy did not force conversation, knowing that silence could sometimes speak louder than words. He noticed the way she moved, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. He understood that every movement, every hesitation, carried a story, a memory of danger and loss. As the day wore on, the cowboy began to see more of her resilience. She was not weak, despite the fear in her eyes. She could read the land, notice the hidden dangers, and move quietly when needed. He admired her strength, even if she did not realize it herself. It reminded him that courage came in many forms, and sometimes the strongest people were those who had survived the most. Eventually, they came to a small stream where the water ran clear and cold. The cowboy led his horse to the edge and let it drink while he gestured toward the woman. "There's water here if you want it," he said gently. She glanced at the stream, then at him. For a long moment, she seemed to hesitate. Then she approached cautiously and knelt to drink. It was a small act, but it felt significant. Trust was growing, slowly, in quiet steps. As the sun sank lower, panting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the cowboy and the woman made a small camp near the stream. He built a fire, careful not to startle her, and offered her some of the food he carried. She accepted it quietly, her eyes wary but not hostile. The cowboy felt a quiet sense of purpose. This was why he had stayed. Not for glory, not for reward, but because sometimes doing what is right meant putting yourself in the path of uncertainty, even when it was easier to turn away. That night, as they sat by the fire, the cowboy thought about the journey ahead. He knew there would be dangers, that the road would not be easy, and that helping this woman could cost him more than he imagined. But he also knew that he could not leave her. There was something in her presence that demanded courage, something that called him to face fear and uncertainty with honesty. The woman, for her part, watched the fire quietly. She did not speak much, but the cowboy could sense her thoughts. She had survived alone for so long, and yet here she was allowing a stranger to share a small part of her world. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. And so, under the open sky with the stars beginning to twinkle above, the cowboy and the woman prepared for whatever came next. Neither knew what the future held, but both understood that sometimes courage was not just about facing danger, it was about staying even when the heart told you to run. And in that quiet, fragile moment, a bond began to form, one that would shape the rest of their journey in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The next morning, the cowboy woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the trees and the sound of birds calling in the distance. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of earth and grass. His horse was already grazing quietly, and he could see the woman still sitting near the small fire from the night before, staring at the embers as if trying to read a story in them. She had kept to herself, her eyes distant, and yet there was a quiet strength about her that drew his attention. The cowboy approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Morning," he said softly. His voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had faced many dangers and survived. She did not immediately respond. Instead, she nodded slightly, acknowledging him without words. There was a small gesture, but it told him she was willing to share the day with him, even if her silence remained. As they packed up their small camp and prepared to continue along the trail, the cowboy noticed the way she moved. There was a grace in her steps, but also a tension, as if she was always ready to flee at a moment's notice. Her hands, though delicate in appearance, were strong from a life of survival. She adjusted her simple clothing carefully, making sure everything was secure and practical for travel. It was clear to the cowboy that she had learned to live in a world where danger was never far away. They walked together, the horse carrying supplies while the cowboy led it carefully. The woman kept her distance, walking slightly behind him at first, but gradually moving closer as the hours passed. They did not speak much. The cowboy understood that words were not always necessary. Sometimes silence could be more comforting than conversation. Still, he wanted her to feel safe, to know that he was not just a passing stranger but someone she could rely on. Eventually, he spoke again.
"You don't have to tell me your story if you're not ready," he said quietly. "I just want you to know I'm here. You're not alone anymore."
She glanced at him briefly, her eyes flickering with a mixture of caution and curiosity. For a moment it seemed she might speak, but then she looked away, focusing on the path ahead. The cowboy understood.
She had been hurt before, had trusted people only to be let down. Opening up was not easy, and he could not rush her.
He had to earn her trust, step by step, day by day. The trail led them through a narrow valley surrounded by rocky hills. The wind whispered through the stones, carrying the faint sound of water from a distant stream. The cowboy noticed her reaction immediately. She paused, sniffing the air, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the terrain. He realized that she was not only aware of her surroundings, but also highly alert to potential danger.
Every sound, every movement mattered to her. It was a skill born of necessity, one he respected deeply.
"Do you hear that?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. The cowboy stopped and listened. There was a faint rustle in the grass ahead, the sound of small creatures moving, nothing threatening, but he nodded.
"I hear it, just small animals."
"We're safe, for now."
She relaxed slightly but did not let her guard down completely. The cowboy could see that she had learned to survive by trusting no one completely, and he knew that breaking through that barrier would take time. He did not mind. He had patience. He had learned that rushing trust was often a mistake. As they continued walking, the cowboy tried to learn more about her, but gently, without pressing too hard.
"Do you have a place you're trying to reach?"
he asked. She hesitated before answering.
"I'm looking for safety,"
she said finally. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience. She had known danger, loss, and hardship. To her, safety was not just a place. It was a rare feeling, a fragile hope that life could be stable even for a moment.
The cowboy nodded. "I understand. We'll find a safe place together. I'll make sure you're protected as best I can."
Her eyes softened just slightly, a small sign that she appreciated his words, even if she did not fully trust them yet. They walked on, the silence between them growing comfortable.
Sometimes the cowboy found that silence could communicate more than words ever could. In it, there was space for thought, for observation, for the quiet building of trust.
As the sun climbed higher, they stopped near a small grove of trees to rest. The cowboy let his horse graze while he set out a small amount of food for the woman. She accepted it cautiously, her movements careful, almost as if she were measuring whether she could trust him to provide without expecting anything in return. The cowboy did not mind. He understood that every small gesture mattered when someone had been hurt in the past. He watched her eat, noticing the way her hands moved, the careful way she handled each piece of bread. She had survived on her own for so long that even small acts of normalcy were cautious, deliberate, and meaningful. The cowboy realized that he admired not just her courage, but also her intelligence and resilience.
She was not a victim, she was a survivor, and he respected that deeply. After a while, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I've had to fight for everything I have. Every day."
Every step, the cowboy nodded, not interrupting. He knew she was sharing only a small piece of her story, and he did not want to push her further. He had learned over the years that people opened up in their own time when they felt safe enough to do so. He simply listened, offering his presence as a silent promise of understanding. The afternoon passed, and the landscape began to change. The plains gave way to gentle hills, dotted with rocks and low shrubs. The cowboy noticed how the woman moved with confidence now, her steps more deliberate, as if she had become one with the land. He realized that she had spent years learning to read the earth, to understand its dangers and its opportunities.
She was clever, resourceful, and perceptive. A partner in survival rather than someone who needed protection. By evening, they reached a small river, its water sparkling in the fading light. The cowboy led his horse to drink while gesturing toward the woman. She approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of danger. She knelt by the water, cupping her hands to drink, and then splashed a little on her face. The cool water refreshed her, and for a moment she allowed herself a small sense of relief. The cowboy watched her, sensing a shift. She was beginning to feel safe, at least enough to let down her guard slightly. He knew that this was only the first step. Trust would not come all at once, and fear could return at any moment. But the fact that she had stayed close, shared food, and allowed herself to drink without fear was progress. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they made camp near the riverbank. The cowboy built a fire, careful to keep it small and controlled, and offered her a place to sit. She accepted, settling down quietly while he prepared their simple evening meal. The firelight danced on her face, highlighting the lines of experience and resilience etched into her features. He could see the strength that had carried her through so many challenges, and he felt a deep respect for her courage. That night, as they sat by the fire, the cowboy thought about the journey ahead. He knew there would be challenges, dangers, and difficult choices, but he also knew that he had made the right decision in staying with her. This was more than protection. It was a partnership, built on quiet understanding, respect, and shared determination. The woman, for her part, remained quiet, but her eyes occasionally met his. There was a spark of recognition there, a small acknowledgement that perhaps not all strangers would harm her, that some could offer help without expecting anything in return. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless, and the cowboy could sense that it was the beginning of something meaningful. And so, under the vast sky filled with stars, with the soft murmur of the river nearby, the cowboy and the woman prepared for the days ahead. Neither knew what challenges awaited, but both understood that survival was not just about strength. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to face the unknown together. And in that shared silence, a bond began to grow, one built on mutual respect, quiet understanding, and the first glimmer of trust. The morning air was cool and crisp as the cowboy and the Apache woman continued along the winding trail. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the hills and valleys, and the world seemed calm and peaceful. Yet the cowboy knew that peace was often fragile in these parts. Danger could appear when least expected, and the woman he had promised to protect needed every bit of vigilance he could give. The woman walked slightly ahead of him this time, her eyes scanning the ground and the surrounding brush. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands flexed as if ready to defend herself at any moment. She had learned to survive alone, and every step reminded him of the hardships she had faced. He admired her strength and resourcefulness, but he also knew that her independence came from a life of fear and mistrust. She was not used to letting anyone near her, and he had to earn the right to stay by her side. "Do you need water before we go further?" the cowboy asked. His voice was calm but carried the quiet authority of someone who had faced danger and survived. The woman shook her head slightly. "Not yet," she replied softly. Her words were measured, careful, as if she were weighing every syllable before letting it escape. The cowboy respected that. He understood that trust could not be forced and that patience was more powerful than persuasion. The trail led them into a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side. The sun barely reached the bottom, leaving shadows that danced with the slightest movement of wind. The woman paused, lowering herself to inspect the ground. "Tracks," she whispered. "We're not alone." The cowboy's heart quickened, but he remained calm. He studied the tracks and recognized them as the marks of a small group of men, probably wandering hunters or bandits. "We need to be careful," he said. "They might not be friendly." The woman nodded, her eyes sharp and alert. She moved quietly, almost gliding along the rocks, her instincts guiding her. The cowboy followed, keeping his horse close but out of sight, knowing that the horse could make noise and give away their presence.
He had faced dangerous men before, but he knew that the woman's survival skills were exceptional, and he felt a mixture of admiration and relief that she was with him. For hours they navigated the canyon, careful not to make any noise. The cowboy noticed small details, the rustle of leaves, the faint smell of smoke, the way the wind shifted. The woman pointed out a distant figure, barely visible among the rocks.
"They're moving this way,"
she whispered. "We should find higher ground." The cowboy nodded. They climbed a steep incline, using the rocks for support, and found a ledge overlooking the canyon. From there, they could see the men below, moving slowly, unaware of their presence. The woman crouched low, her eyes scanning every movement. She whispered instructions to him, guiding him to stay hidden and conserve their energy. He followed without question, realizing that her instincts were sharper than his, honed by years of surviving alone in a harsh world. As the men passed below, the cowboy felt a mixture of relief and admiration. The woman had saved them both from potential danger without drawing attention to herself. He realized that courage was not just about facing danger head-on, it was about knowing when to move, when to hide, and when to act. He had protected many people before, but he had rarely encountered someone who could teach him so much about survival in such a short time.
After the danger passed, they descended carefully from the ledge and continued along the trail. The woman's expression was calm, but the cowboy noticed the tension in her muscles, the way she seemed ready for anything.
He understood that she carried the weight of constant vigilance, a burden he could only imagine. He also knew that this burden had shaped her into a person of incredible resilience and skill, someone who could survive where others would falter. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they came across a small clearing surrounded by trees. The woman stopped and crouched to examine the ground.
"Fresh water nearby," she said quietly. "We can rest and refill."
The cowboy led his horse to the stream, letting it drink while he watched the woman. She moved with careful precision, gathering water in a small container and filtering it through a piece of cloth. Every action she took was deliberate, efficient, and thoughtful. The cowboy could see that she had learned to make the most of every resource, to survive even in the harshest conditions. He admired her skills and felt a growing respect for the way she faced the world, even when it had been cruel to her. They ate a simple meal together, the silence between them comfortable this time. The woman occasionally glanced at him, as if measuring his intentions and deciding whether to trust him further.
The cowboy understood the process. He had lived long enough to know that trust was earned slowly, through actions rather than words, and he was determined to show her step by step that he would not betray her confidence or abandon her in her time of need. After their meal, they continued their journey. The trail became more rugged, with rocks and uneven ground making travel difficult.
The cowboy noticed the woman's determination as she navigated the path with careful precision, never losing her balance or faltering. He realized that she had faced far greater challenges than this, and that her courage was not just physical but mental, a strength born of experience and survival. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the land. They found a sheltered spot near a grove of trees to rest for the night. The cowboy built a small fire, careful not to draw attention, and offered her a place to sit. She accepted, settling down quietly while he prepared their evening meal. The woman spoke softly for the first time that day. "I've learned to read the land," she said, her voice steady but thoughtful.
"I know when danger is near. I know where to hide. I know when to move and when to wait. It has kept me alive."
The cowboy nodded, listening carefully. "That's a rare skill," he said. "Not everyone can survive like that. You've been through more than most, and you're still standing." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and pain. "Standing doesn't mean I'm safe," she said quietly.
"It just means I'm still here. There's always something waiting to take it away." The cowboy understood.
Life had been harsh to both of them in different ways, but he also knew that their meeting was not by chance. He had chosen to protect her, and she had allowed him to stay by her side.
Together, they had a better chance of facing the dangers ahead, not just because of his skills, but because of her instincts and intelligence. That night, as the stars appeared in the sky, they sat by the fire in silence.
The woman occasionally glanced at him, and he returned the look with quiet assurance. Neither spoke much, but their understanding of each other grew. The cowboy realized that protecting someone was not just about keeping them safe from harm, it was about sharing the journey, respecting their strengths and being present when fear and doubt threatened to take over. The woman, for her part, felt a strange sense of relief.
She had survived alone for so long, but now there was someone she could rely on, someone who respected her abilities and did not try to control her. It was a new feeling, unfamiliar, but comforting.
She did not yet trust him completely, but she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could survive with someone at her side. As they settled to sleep under the open sky, the cowboy and the woman both knew that the days ahead would be filled with challenges.
There would be dangers, tests of courage, and moments of doubt, but they also knew that together they could face them.
And in that quiet night, as the fire burned low and the stars shone above, a bond began to take shape, a bond built on respect, shared struggle, and the first glimmers of trust. Neither of them knew exactly what the future held, but both understood that survival was not just about strength or skill, it was about courage, patience, and the willingness to stand together when the world seemed determined to tear them apart. And so, as the night deepened and the land grew silent, they prepared for the challenges of the next day, knowing that each step they took together brought them closer to understanding, connection, and perhaps something even deeper. The morning light broke gently across the plains, turning the sky a soft shade of pink. The cowboy woke first, as usual, and looked at the woman sleeping beside the small fire. She had chosen to stay closer to him that night, a small but significant sign that she was slowly beginning to trust him. He could see the tension in her body was less pronounced than before, though it was still there, a shadow of the life she had survived alone. He stirred quietly, careful not to wake her, and fed the horse. While he worked, he thought about how far they had come together. From the first moment he had encountered her alone on the trail, he had been drawn to her courage, her intelligence, and her strength. But now he sensed there was something deeper, a part of her that she had not yet shared. He could feel the weight of her past, the invisible burdens she carried, and he knew that if he wanted to help her fully, he would need to earn her trust even further. When she awoke, she was quiet, gathering water from a nearby stream. Her movements were careful and deliberate as always, but there was a softness in the way she carried herself this morning. It was as if the night had allowed her to feel safe enough to relax slightly, even just a little. The cowboy nodded to her, and she returned a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was a fragile gesture, but meaningful, a small bridge between them. They continued along the trail, the air warming as the sun rose. The path led them through rolling hills dotted with shrubs and small trees, the sound of birds filling the silence. As they walked, the cowboy watched her carefully, sensing that today might be different. There was a tension in her eyes, a hesitation that spoke of thoughts she had kept hidden. Finally, they reached a quiet glade near a stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the cowboy gestured toward it. "We can rest here," he said gently. "It's safe, for now." The woman paused, then nodded. She knelt by the stream to drink, her hands moving quickly but carefully. The cowboy watched her, giving her the time she needed. He did not rush, did not speak unnecessarily, allowing her the space to feel comfortable and in control. He knew that patience was more important than words when someone had been hurt before. After a few moments, she sat back on the grass, brushing her hands together. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For the first time, there was something different in her gaze, something she had not shown before. Vulnerability, fear, and a deep, quiet question that she had carried with her for a long time.
I need to tell you something, she said softly, her voice trembling just slightly. The cowboy nodded, encouraging her without pushing.
"Take your time," he said. "You don't have to say anything until you're ready. I'm here."
She took a deep breath and hesitated, then began. "I've been through things, terrible things," she said quietly. "I've lost people I loved. I've been hurt in ways I cannot even explain.
"And I have scars."
The cowboy listened carefully, his heart aching for the pain she had endured. He could see the tension in her body, the way she hugged herself as if trying to protect what remained of her. He said nothing, letting her speak at her own pace, knowing that interrupting would take away the courage it had taken for her to begin opening up.
These scars, they're not just on my body, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. They're in my heart, in my mind.
They remind me every day of what I've survived and what I've lost. I've learned to hide them from the world, to pretend I am strong and untouchable.
But the truth is, I am not.
The cowboy remained silent, but his eyes conveyed understanding.
He did not judge, did not flinch. He had seen suffering before, and he knew that the strength of a person was not measured by what they hid, but by the courage it took to face life despite it.
I'm afraid, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Afraid that if I show you who I really am, if I show you my scars, you will leave, like everyone else has before. You will see me for what I am, broken and damaged, and you will walk away.
The cowboy shook his head gently.
I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. I've seen your strength.
I've seen what you've survived. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you courageous.
And it doesn't change anything between us. I'm here to stay.
She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief.
You mean that? She asked softly, her voice barely audible.
I do, he replied. I chose to be with you because I believe in you.
Not because you are perfect, but because you are real. Because you have survived when so many others would have given up.
And because I want to be by your side, not to protect you from yourself, but to face the world with you together. For the first time, a small tear rolled down her cheek. She did not wipe it away immediately, allowing herself to feel the release of emotion she had held inside for so long. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and then spoke again.
Will you stay if I show you everything? If you see the parts of me that I have hidden, the scars that I try to keep secret, will you still stay?
The cowboy stepped closer and took her hand gently in his. I will stay, he said firmly.
Not because of your scars, but because of who you are. They are part of your story, yes, but they do not define you. You define yourself, and I want to be here for all of it. Your pain, your courage, your fears, and your hopes. I want to face it with you.
She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt. There was none. His gaze was steady, kind, and unwavering. For the first time, she felt a sense of relief, a fragile but growing trust that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her and accept her without judgment. Slowly, she began to tell him more.
Not all at once, but in small pieces. Stories of loss, moments of fear, times when she had thought she would never survive. The cowboy listened, never interrupting, never judging, only offering his presence and his quiet support.
Each story revealed more of her strength, and each admission brought them closer together. Hours passed as the sun moved across the sky.
The cowboy and the woman sat by the stream, sharing stories, fears, and small laughs. It was a turning point in their journey.
For the first time, she felt that she could be seen without fear, and he realized that protecting someone meant more than guarding them from danger. It meant accepting them fully, scars and all. By evening, they had formed a bond stronger than either had anticipated. The woman no longer looked away from him with suspicion, and the cowboy no longer felt like a stranger in her world.
They had shared vulnerability, courage, and trust, the foundation of something lasting.
As the fire crackled in the fading light, the woman rested her head against a nearby tree and spoke softly.
I didn't think I could ever show anyone my scars, she admitted. But with you, I feel like maybe it's possible.
Like maybe I don't have to hide anymore. The cowboy smiled gently, his heart full. You don't have to, he said. Not with me. Not anymore.
We'll face the world together. Whatever comes, we face it side by side.
For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. The cowboy had not only protected her from the dangers of the outside world, but he had also given her the courage to face the truths within herself. And in that quiet moment, under the vast sky filled with stars, a deep trust was formed, a trust that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The night fell softly around them, the firelight flickering on their faces. The woman felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a burden she had carried alone for so long. And the cowboy, too, felt a sense of purpose he had not felt before. Their journey was far from over. But now they knew they would face it together, each step strengthened by trust, courage, and the willingness to accept one another fully. And so, under the blanket of the night sky, with the sounds of the stream flowing gently nearby, they both knew that the next steps of their journey would be easier, not because the road would be safe, but because they would walk it together, carrying each other's burdens and hopes. For the first time, the scars of the past did not feel like a weight to bear alone. They were part of a story that they would face side by side. The next morning, the air was fresh and cool, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers from the nearby hills. The cowboy and the Apache woman rose early, ready to continue their journey. The events of the previous day had changed something between them. There was a quiet understanding now, a bond that had grown from trust, courage, and shared experiences. She no longer carried the weight of fear as heavily, and he felt a new sense of purpose in staying by her side. As they traveled, the woman began to share more stories of her past, but this time with a hint of confidence. She spoke of the hardships she had faced, of losses that had nearly broken her, and of moments when she had thought survival was impossible. Each story was a reminder of the strength she had built over the years, and the cowboy listened with respect, never interrupting or judging. He realized that she was teaching him as much about resilience as he was teaching her about trust. The trail ahead became more challenging. The path wound through rocky terrain, and the heat of the sun made each step demanding. Yet the woman moved with determination, her instincts guiding them safely through the difficult landscape. The cowboy followed closely, keeping a careful eye on both the trail and the surrounding area. He understood that danger could appear at any moment, and he was ready to act to protect her. But he also knew that she was no longer helpless. She had the skills, the awareness, and the courage to survive alongside him. At midday, they found a shaded grove beside a small river. The woman knelt by the water to drink, and the cowboy offered her some food he had packed. She accepted it, smiling faintly, a gesture of gratitude and comfort. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel that she could rely on someone without fear. It was a small but meaningful step, one that showed she was beginning to embrace the presence of another human being in her life. After resting briefly, they continued along the trail. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the woman paused, her eyes scanning the horizon.
"We should find higher ground," she said thoughtfully. "The land ahead is open, and we could be seen from far away." The cowboy nodded.
He had come to trust her judgment completely.
Together they navigated a narrow ridge, moving carefully over uneven rocks. From this vantage point, they could see the wide expanse of the plains below.
The view was breathtaking, but it also reminded them of the dangers that still existed. Despite the beauty, the land could be unforgiving, and the cowboy knew they needed to remain vigilant. As the sun began to set, they reached a small clearing with a natural shelter formed by rocks and trees. The cowboy built a small fire while the woman gathered kindling nearby. The warmth of the fire brought comfort after a long day of travel, and the two of them settled near it, the silence between them now filled with a sense of security rather than fear. "I never thought I could feel safe like this," the woman said quietly, breaking the silence.
"Not with anyone. Not after everything I've been through."
The cowboy reached out and gently took her hand.
"You're safe now," he said softly. "Not just physically, but in every way that matters. I'm not going anywhere. We'll face whatever comes together."
Her eyes glistened with emotion, and she squeezed his hand briefly.
"I want to believe that," she whispered. "I want to trust it." "You can," he replied.
"It takes time, but you're not alone anymore." As night fell, they sat together by the fire, talking quietly about their hopes for the future. They spoke of places they wanted to see, dreams they had put aside in the simple joys of life that had been denied to them for too long. The woman laughed softly at a story he told, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a spark of happiness without fear of it being taken away.
Days turned into weeks, and their journey continued. Along the way, they faced challenges, storms that threatened to wash out trails, wild animals that crossed their path, and the ever-present uncertainty of life on the plains. Yet each obstacle only strengthened their bond. The woman's skills and instincts combined with the cowboy's experience and courage allowed them to navigate every difficulty together. Through it all, the woman grew stronger, not just in her physical ability to survive, but in her trust of the cowboy.
She began to share more of her past, her hopes, and even her dreams for a life beyond survival. He listened, never judging, always supporting. And in turn, he shared parts of his own life that he had kept private for too long. Their connection deepened, built on honesty, respect, and shared experiences. One evening, as they rested by a quiet stream, the woman spoke softly.
I used to believe that scars were something to hide, something that made a person less than whole. But now, I think they're part of who we are. They tell our story, show our strength, and remind us that we can endure.
And now, I don't have to hide them from you. The cowboy smiled, his heart full. I don't want you to hide them, he said gently. I want to know all of you, the strengths, the fears, the scars, and the hopes.
That's what makes you who you are. That's what makes you incredible.
She looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. Thank you, she whispered.
For staying, for believing in me, for seeing me when I thought no one could.
The cowboy took her hand and held it firmly.
I'll stay, he said. Always. And together we'll face whatever comes next. We'll build a life, not just survive, and we'll do it side by side. As the stars appeared in the night sky, they sat together by the fire, knowing that their journey was far from over, but they also knew that they were no longer facing the world alone. The cowboy and the woman had discovered something rare, a bond built not just on protection, but on trust, respect, and love. They had faced fear, danger, and the ghosts of their pasts, and they had emerged stronger because they faced them together.
In the days that followed, they continued their journey, but the world no longer felt as threatening. The woman moved with confidence, knowing that she had someone who would stand by her not to control her, but to share the burdens of life. The cowboy felt a renewed sense of purpose, realizing that true courage was not just in facing danger, but in staying when it was easier to leave, and in believing in someone else when they struggled to believe in themselves. Eventually, they reached a small settlement where life seemed calmer, the kind of place where people looked out for one another. The woman's skills and knowledge of the land quickly earned the respect of the community, and the cowboy's reputation as a brave and fair man preceded him. Together, they found a place to settle, a home where they could live safely, yet still feel connected to the land that had shaped them both. Even as life settled into a rhythm, the lessons of their journey stayed with them. The woman learned that trust could be given and received without fear, and the cowboy learned that protecting someone was not just about guarding them from the world, but also about standing with them emotionally, fully, and without hesitation. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the hills, the woman rested her head on the cowboy's shoulder. I never thought I could feel this at peace, she said softly. I never thought I could share my life with someone and not be afraid of losing it.
The cowboy held her close. And you don't have to, he replied. We've faced the storms together. We've seen danger and fear, and we've come through stronger. This is just the beginning, and whatever comes, we face it together.
She smiled, feeling the truth of his words deep in her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe, loved, and accepted fully for who she was. And the cowboy, too, felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known, knowing that he had not only protected her life, but had also helped her see her own strength, her own courage, and her own value. Under the vast sky, filled with stars and the quiet sounds of the plains, they both knew that the hardships they had endured were not the end of their story. They were the beginning. The scars they carried, both visible and hidden, were a testament to their endurance, their courage, and their shared journey. And together they would continue to face the world, not just as survivors, but as partners, equals, and companions who had chosen to stay no matter what. The journey had begun with uncertainty, fear, and danger, but it had led to something far more precious: trust, connection, and hope. And in the warmth of that understanding, the cowboy and the Apache woman found not just safety, but a sense of belonging, a life renewed by courage, honesty, and the knowledge that they would never face the world alone again.